Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Committee for Workers International live broadcast. And of course, today the CWI on our channel will be discussing the horrific situation which unfolded in India. We've seen an incredible situation internationally, the horrors taking place of the oppression of the Palestinian peoples by the Israeli regime. We see the continuing crisis taking place globally of capitalism. But as far as the immediate impact of the pandemic is concerned, we now see it hitting dramatically in the most horrific manner possible much of the neo-colonial world. And at the heart of that crisis is, of course, the situation in India. Under the Modi government, the Modi regime, we've had an horrific situation. Officially, over 250,000 deaths. We have 4,000 deaths, and these are the official figures, if you can believe them. Over 4,000 deaths per day. You have terrible scenes that have been depicted on the world media reports of dozens of dead bodies being found in the Ganges River and an horrific situation opening up for the masses throughout India. And now, of course, we see the impact of the pandemic spreading out of the cities, and it appears now to be hitting the rural areas, as I'm sure our guests will comment on today. And we're very pleased today to be joined by two active members and leaders of the New Socialist Alternative in India. That is Ashme from Chennai and Youvrag from Pune. And they'll be discussing, of course, all these developments and more, and drawing some of the political conclusions from them. So we'd like to begin by asking all of our viewers, as usual, go to the YouTube channel and subscribe to that. You can also get a further analysis of our position in India by visiting our website at socialistworld.net. But let's get on and move to the discussion straight away. And maybe we could begin with Ashme. And perhaps you could begin by outlining the horrific situations of the infections, the deaths, which seems to really be almost like there's a massacre taking place a part of the population. So maybe you could begin by outlining, Ashme, the current situation, both in terms of health, but in terms of the general social conditions faced by the masses in India.
Good evening, comrades. So, as you said, the daily deaths per rate is really high. And now, India's infection rate has crossed the mark of 3.5 lakhs per day. So people recovering every day is way lesser. I mean, when compared to the infections rate, people recovering per day, the amount of people recovering per day is way less when compared with people getting infected each day. So this is at the same time when the healthcare system, unlike the healthcare system in the other countries of the world, India's healthcare system is like very poor. People are struggling to get oxygen, beds with oxygen. Hospitals are filled with COVID patients, but there are very less doctor-patient ratio. So people are finding it difficult to, get the COVID treatment, and even the vaccination is not yet. India is like densely populated, and the media coverage, like the mass media over here in India portrays the scenario in a very different way. Like there, even if a few media comes forward to criticize the Modi regime, their criticism is very lukewarm. Only in the world mass medias and in social medias, we see many outcries of people coming forward and calling for helps, and who people are calling for helps, and they are coming forward to ask for oxygen cylinders. They are not even getting the oxygen cylinders, and the healthcare system in India is like way bad. We see hospitals where uh, all the ambulances line up. They're not getting any beds. I mean, also, the media, the mass media in India is planning to, uh, it usually puts the blame game. It plans to blame the very public who are being affected by this situation. Uh, as in, when people who are facing this, they just say people are not wearing masks, they are not following social distancing is one of the concerns these media houses like very majorly put that in the light. But whereas how the government is tackling this issue is gets very less space. The coverage for that is like so less. That is one of the major things. And people who work for a minimum wage, like even during our previous discussions, we have time and again discussed about the poverty line of India. Like in urban areas, we say, I mean, according to the government's reports, 32 rupees, a person earning 32 rupees and above in an urban area is considered above poverty line. So when this is the situation, even even though India has a set of hospitals that is government owned, that gives treatment free of cost. There are many private hospitals. Even during the COVID situation, in the very beginning, they never come forward to treat the patients. And even when they started treating COVID patients, we saw a situation where during last year, the amount, the fees per day was somewhere around 2 lakhs. Even even the middle class of India will not be able to, like, their monthly wage is somewhere around 50,000, 60,000 is what the average wage of a middle class family in India. So they were not able to, get the proper treatments for COVID. And while this is the situation, during the second wave, we would have seen the news coverage from all over the world where we don't even have enough crematoriums to properly take care of the bodies which were affected by COVID. We saw scenarios where patients who died because of COVID were burnt in the platforms in public parks, and they were also, those who didn't have money for the last rituals, they just put the COVID patients' bodies in the rivers, in the river Ganga, and that would again lead to, a situation where this will again infect more people. So there was no proper proper plan was put in place. Last year when Modi regime came up with the lockdown, it was so unprecedented, it was so unplanned, where people were asked all of a sudden, just like the demonetization announcement, it happened all of a sudden uh, without any pre-plan, and all the transport services came to a sudden halt, and no one was transported. Like India is a densely populated place, like I say, and where people from different parts of the states come to different parts to work for earning their daily wage. No, they don't have. I mean, they take their wage. They get their food. That's how it works. They don't, have much of a savings to get transport. But their transportation was not given a priority, and they had to, walk back to their own hometowns, and pesticides were being was sprayed on them, and so many. Uh, so many acts which weren't humanly took place during that point in time. And also even now in the second wave, those beds where the oxygen beds are there is very less, and even in those places oxygen leakages happen, accidents happen. So all these things also lead to a very crucial situation. And coming to the point of the funds, every state has to be given their GST share, their tax share, but that is not happening. And also, one of the main concern is that for the PM Cares Fund, the PM got many funds from the citizens of India, but what really happened is they don't give a proper data of how that fund is being spent and for what it is being spent. There's no clear data of that, and so they don't. Even when asked with the Right to Information Act, when people ask, the government really says that there's no data about that. Is what the answer that we get. And in such kind of situation, India is the third largest producer of, you know, third largest pharmaceutical industry is situated here in India, but still we didn't get real. We really didn't get vaccinated. Indians didn't really get vaccinated. Not all of them, all of us got vaccinated. And the price is also really higher in India. One dosage of vaccine is sold for around 600 rupees. That is around $8. So that's how the scenario is. It is way higher when compared with the other states of the, in other countries. So that's how the situation is. Modi actually projected Serum Institute of India as one of the national, one of the nationalist vaccination, but that didn't really happen. Even when they were able to fetch a margin, they were able to fetch a profit out of selling it for a very less price, but they didn't, the institute didn't come forward to do that. And that's how the real situation over here is. So, yeah.
Okay, well, you described an absolutely horrific situation there, Rashmi, and I mean, it's obviously devastating. It's a real illustration of the nature of capitalism, and of course, you comrades there have also suffered it, have been, part of this. A number of comrades in India who've gone down with COVID, including one of our leading comrades, Jagadish, who had a terrible time in hospital, was ill for a period, and he's now at home recovering. And wish him all the best. And of course, he'd be with us on this program today, but for the fact he was stricken down with COVID some weeks ago, and we wish him all the best for a speedy recovery. But it's a real paradox, the whole situation, in terms of the horrors that are there. I mean, you mentioned there, Rashmi, that India is the third largest pharmaceutical concentration. Well, I mean, it's also the world's biggest producer of vaccines. It produces more vaccines than any other country, and yet the mass of the Indian population is starved of it. I mean, it's a condemnation of capitalism. Now, maybe turning to Youvrag, we have read here in the press, and it's been played up a lot. If you go back a few weeks, we were being told that the rates of infection and death in India were relatively low, or very low. India had managed the crisis, and then there was a dramatic change took place. So how do you see that situation? What was there, in fact, a real change, or was the real situation just a pack of lies that Modi was turning out? So, maybe you, Raj, will have some thoughts and observations on that. Why the sudden change in the situation?
Thanks, Comrade Johnny, for bringing it up, because as you rightly said, it was trumpeted that India, under the leadership of Modi, could avoid the corona crisis. It sailed through, and the number of deaths and casualties was low. But then it was a white lie, and this is from two perspectives. One is obviously the figures given that were not correct. Later, media exposed many of the things wherein the figures of the testing, the phone, like in certain states, the phone numbers used for testing of the patients, or phone number of the patients which were tested, the phone number was 0000, right? Like that. It was completely fraud thing. So first of all, the figures reported were wrong. That's one thing. But even if we discount that, then okay, as the first wave perhaps did not strike that hard. Now I'm saying this when we compare it with second wave, but not otherwise. I think even first wave was devastating. But if we look at the second wave, then yes, to an extent, the number of casualties were relatively lesser. But then, I mean, the Modi regime used it. They thought that this is the opportunity to exploit the opportunity and project as to how under Modi's leadership. India kind of survived the crisis, but that wasn't true. Because of certain factors, the first generation of the virus, did not perhaps had such a devastating scale of deaths. But then the new one, the new one which mutated, and kind of virus mutating isn't something which should really shock. That was something really expected. Then even second wave was expected, but then the current Modi regime did not really move or did not really do anything to improve the healthcare system. I think India had a fair amount of warning that its healthcare system is really in shambles, and somehow it had got ample opportunity, to restore its house and to put the healthcare system in order to deal with the second wave. But nothing of that sort was done. In certain states, like in Maharashtra, the state government did bring private hospitals, under kind of government control for some time. Kind of it had reserved certain beds in private hospitals, and the government hospitals would manage those beds. So that was a relatively kind of a good move. But obviously, under capitalism, it could not work, or it would work only to a limited extent. So private hospitals resisted, or they kind of did not cooperate, but still it had some effect. But this was done only in certain states or certain parts. Nationally, nothing, absolutely nothing of this sort was done. In fact, Modi regime had given a free hand for entire public kind of private healthcare sector to charge heftily, and to kind of use the resources as per its wish. So this has really proved to be quite in fact.
Uh, Youvrag, I think we've got a sound problem here.
Modi regime,
Oh, you're back now.
It has utterly neglected, it has utterly neglected the scaling up the healthcare system. I think the Indians are paying quite hugely for that. Kind of, kind of, when we say that this is really the crisis of capitalism, we really do not mean it in a general way, as some general statement. I think India is a very kind of bad example of how capitalism has betrayed kind of billions of people. As Comrade Rashmi rightly pointed, India is the pharmacy of the world. It is the third largest kind of pharmaceutical producing nation, number one in terms of vaccines. But has that capacity been used to prepare for the second wave, or even after second wave had hit, was it used to really make the vaccines or medicines available to the masses? It was not at all. You know, I mean, like the drugs like remdesivir or some other drugs, those were exported, till the mid of the second wave, till the mid of April. The medicines which are critical for COVID treatment, those were exported. The government did not, I mean, it gave a free hand to the private sector to sell them at the usually kind of profitable prices. And because of all these things, we see that we have the one of the
Okay.
but people are dying just because they do not get those medicines, you know and even like simple thing like oxygen. I mean, all of us know producing oxygen is not a rocket science. It's not something that requires a huge technology or something like that. And India definitely, I mean, it's though not the one of the advanced industrial countries, but still it's not the backward kind of industrial country. It has still got a significant industrial base. It could have been very easily used to produce the oxygen and to supply it all through the nation. But most of this capacity lies in the private sector, and Modi government, as the real agent of the bourgeoisie, has really refused to intervene in this crisis, to intervene with the private sector, bring its capacity under public control, and use it to deal with the second wave. It was definitely possible, but then the ugliness of the kind of capitalism means that its agents in power, they would not show the courage to kind of take over the private resources and use it for the public sector. In fact, Comrade Tony, I would like to mention a particular, a very, very important observation. This issue of oxygen shortage came up. The Supreme Court, like one of the Sterlite factory, which is owned by the Vedanta, which is a huge multinational mining giant. Its factory was closed 3 years back after massive protests by the locals who were concerned by the huge pollution that the factory caused. But then that particular factory could have been used to produce oxygen. So there was a kind of litigation to use it for oxygen. So Supreme Court observed that why can't state take over this factory and run it for producing the oxygen? So this is more of a common sense on how under this acute situation. It really is one of the steps that any kind of state could have taken, and bring all these private resources under its control and use it for treating the COVID patients. And that, I mean, India did have that kind of capacity, but because of capitalism and its agents in kind of power, India is a classical case of how capitalism has literally betrayed the billions of people. So that's what is really very clear.
No, that's a very important point you made there. I think Youvrag, in terms of the what could have been done, had the government been prepared to intervene, and it exposes the character of it. Now, of course, we have in India, as you've commented, Modi and the BJP have been in power. You have horrific policies introduced even before the pandemic by the Modi regime. It's backed by fascistic forces around the RSS. It's whipped up Hindu nationalism. It's had a horrific onslaught against the Muslim people. And they've had this policy of One India, which, of course, is directed against all of the oppressed minorities. Now, given the depth of the COVID crisis and the pandemic that's taken place, is Modi able to maintain the support that he's had? We've had recent state elections taken place in a number of very important states, and maybe you could comment on the outcome of them. And in particular, in India, as I'm sure many of our viewers will know, we have two large communist parties. Now, What have they put forward during the course of these crises, and indeed during the course of these elections? Did they put an independent class position, or did they tend to buckle towards this pressure of lesser evilism, of just opposing Modi and putting nothing else forward? So maybe Rashmi, to start with, would have some observations you'd like to make on those important points.
To directly answer your question, yes, the Communist parties in India, CPI and CPM, fell to lesser evilism as far as I have noticed. Yeah. In a few places in India, in a few states in India, recently the assembly elections took place. For example, in Tamil Nadu, usually the communist parties will either form an alliance with DMK or ADMK, the two winning regional parties. There was never a situation where when the communist parties in India, the traditional communist parties, have come up with an individual. They have never had an individual. They even right now they don't want to lose their position. They choose the anti-incumbent party, the lesser evil party. That's what is their major idea. The comrades and the CWI New Socialist Alternative Chennai had an opportunity to discuss a few things with a group of individuals who claim to be communist, left-leaning people. They are basically from the Maoist backgrounds and people of traditional Stalinist backgrounds. Without any class consciousness, they came forward. They formed a alliance with all small, petty communist, very small, tiny communist parties. In this. In this organization, there were people from different walks of life. This wasn't really a class conscious coalition. Their only motive was to campaign against BJP, but they didn't have any alternative to put forward. They didn't have any stand. So that's one thing about Tamil Nadu's communist parties. And the Communist Party in general lost their, a ground in India. There were times when in Tamil Nadu, they used to win at least 4 constituencies, 4 seats, but now it has come down to 2. Also in West Bengal, communists had a very good stance in West Bengal, but it is now either Mamta, Trinamool Congress, or BJP. It is how it has become. Only in Assam they were able to gain the support. That's how the thing is. But when we talk about BJP, there are blindfolded supporters who religiously support Modi's government. Though we say people might let's see how the governing has come down because Modi. All being said, there are few followers who blindfoldedly follow Modi, and that's one thing. And also, we can't deny the fact that BJP is gaining ground. People in Tamil Nadu very proudly say that it is a Dravidian state. No national party could ever get a hold of this place. But that's not how. I mean, when we see the results of the recent elections, they have won 4 seats. Though they have contested in 20 constituencies, 4 is of course a big deal. it after a 15 years wait, they were able to win this thing. That's one thing. And usually the BJP party appeals to the majority sentiment, the Hindu sentiment. They appeal to the religious authoritarianism. Till now, they have a base because of that, is what I see.
Good, right, okay. That's interesting.
Maybe,
But
Tony, can I add?
yes, sure, Youvrag, yeah, come in.
Okay, yeah. I think, Comrade Rashmi really made a correct point that the existing kind of established communist parties, CPI and CPM, both of them have really fallen prey to this idea of lesser evilism, and they have been supporting this or that color of bourgeois party, either Congress or some other party, with like saying that okay, they want to really just to prevent BJP from coming to power. And now, kind of Modi, the kind of the acute authoritarian regime that Modi is, they're trying to justify you saying that okay, so let's see, this is a near fascist kind of government. But then if we look at their argument historically, then it is not just now, but historically, they have been flirting with various bourgeois parties for quite few decades. Even if we take the last kind of decade, or the decade of 2000, then in 2005 they had supported the Congress government. So obviously at that time, Modi was nowhere, not even on the horizon, but still they supported. So their kind of flirting with bourgeois party is not new, and they even though they say that they're just doing this to save India from fascism, there is really it's they would like to say that okay, it's more of a strategic. But I would like to point out that it's not strategically it's a blunder. Definitely, the way they have been wiped out in the West Bengal, that's very unfortunate. We have a kind of serious reservations against kind of the policies of CPI, CPM, but then obviously they're being kind of communist forces being wiped out from West Bengal. We are not happy about it. But then what we see in West Bengal is again the continuation, or it's the result of the the policies adopted by CPI, CPM to go with one or another bourgeois party. But the point I wanted to mention is that it also kind of it's not just a strategic, it comes from their very ideological and historical position of looking at the question of India's revolution, the kind of two-stage theory that is espoused by these communist parties. So according to that, it's the stage of bourgeois democratic revolution, and they see that there is a role like some progressive bourgeois party or section has a role to play. That's the kind of theoretic argument that they have, or that's their position. So I think with that kind of position, they have, kind of historically, they have flirted with the so-called progressive bourgeois party. But then this so-called progressive bourgeois party, it has really not been that progressive, and it has really not, it has utterly failed to, kind of carry forward any program for India's working class. And it is essentially because of that kind of failure, or it's kind of like, as we know, it is Congress party which has really led the neoliberal policies in India. So the Modi coming to the power was, in a way, was not only based on Hindu chauvinism. Obviously, the religious chauvinism was definitely a key factor in its power. But again, the last 2 decades of neoliberalism, which has really kind of betrayed the working class, and because of which the section of working class came under the influence of Modi's Achhe Din, that the promise of good days, and kind of got it to power. So that's the kind of historical process through which BJP has come to power. And even if at this stage, the established communist parties are still not really raising the flag of independent class struggle or independent class politics, and still, if they are going ahead with one or another bourgeois party, I think it's a it's really a betrayal of the kind of the question of India's revolution, and that is really very, very serious.
Okay, now, well, that's an important addition there, Youvrag. Now, but maybe you could also come back on the issue. I mean, the Communist parties then have capitulated to the idea fundamentally of lesser evilism, but how, in the depth of this crisis, has it left Modi? I mean, has he sustained his position? I mean, how did he actually do in the elections? And maybe linked to that, because we have this horrific situation. Last year we had the massive general strike, 250 million. We've had the continuation of the very bitter struggle by the peasants and the farmers. What role did the CPs put forward in the course of those particular struggles? And maybe you could also expand a little bit on what's happening within the trade unions in India as well. What role are they playing? Who's in the leadership of them? And what's the perspective? I mean, I think in Pune, we've done some very good work amongst the construction workers, in Chennai with the bank workers. So what is the position in the trade unions? But maybe Youvrag, you could begin by making a few observations on those points.
But before that, maybe I'll just quickly comment upon the first aspect of how BJP is doing, or has BJP been able to kind of sustain its support. So the clear answer is no. I mean, it has been losing ground. In past 1.5 years, it has lost elections in I guess 7 states of India. It has lost election. It has been losing support. So and whatever support it has, for example, in West Bengal, it has been massively discredited. The way Modi, then Shah, and almost entire cabinet, entire BJP, was kind of campaigning for 1 month, with utter disregard to, and they kind of made it appear as if they would take the they would form the government. And at one point, even the political analysts were seriously kind of contemplating if that could happen, but then that didn't happen, and BJP has fared miserably. But nonetheless, it has still become the opposition party, and in a way, it has replaced the communist parties. And BJP is like kind of trying to portray that, okay, we didn't form the government, but still we are now opposition party, and it's a huge success. Is that true? That's not at all true. Uh, I mean, BJP and Modi, both of them, they have been losing ground consistently, not just the kind of national Lok Sabha election. They have been losing ground. But whatever numbers they have, are those real numbers? Then if we see the way elections are being done in India, it is the kind of gross misuse of state power. Like in West Bengal, they have secured 74 seats. But do they really reflect the BJP's strength? No, because the way they have abused all the central government institutions, be it the enforcement department, the investigation department, the Supreme Court, and worst of all, the election commission. Election commission is in charge of conducting the election, and the election commission has become the most spineless institutions. The way election commission played the role in recent election, it has been completely discredited. And all they reduced themselves to some small wing of BJP, So numbers that BJP has got, those are far, the real numbers are far lesser than that. Again, most of the candidates which have won on BJP tickets, those are not really the BJP candidates, but those are the candidates imported from other established parties. With most of the times they are threatened of some police investigation, or they are bought over using the money power, and BJP fills them, and then that's how they get the numbers. So, notwithstanding any claims, it is very clear, it's conspicuously clear that the BJP, including BJP, has been really losing ground, and Modi in particular. I mean, despite all this thing, Modi using his personal charisma has been I mean, people even in last national election, we had situation wherein certain people said, "Oh, we have been betrayed by the BJP party," and they did not vote for BJP. But still, there were a good number of people who said that, "Okay, we know that the government has really not been functioning, but we have a trust in Modi." But this is now very I mean, this is really historical juncture, I would say, in India, and especially COVID situation. Because of COVID situation, large supporters of Modi, they have been completely disappointed, and they feel betrayed, the way Modi regime has utterly failed to handle the COVID situation, and the mayhem it has caused. Even the personal credibility of the Modi has really taken a huge dent, and I mean, this may not immediately reflect in all the as we know, the bourgeois politics could turn as ugly as capitalism itself. This all of this may not immediately reflect in numbers, but it's very clear that the BJP has been greatly losing ground. Yeah, so that was about the first thing. I don't know, Comrade Rashmi, do you want to make any comments before we come back on the question of class struggle?
Uh, Before coming to the question, I forgot to mention about the Kerala's results. For the second time in Kerala, CPM has come back to power. I think this is because of the way the state government handled the COVID issues. Kerala was the first state in India to have, witnessed a few COVID cases, and they already had the, experience of handling Nipah virus in the past years. So that's where they, even before the whole country went into a full lockdown, Kerala handled the COVID situation really well. But of course, it has gone up now because of the second wave. But yeah, that is one of the, I see that as one of the important reasons for the left alliance to have come to power. This is for the consecutive time, for the second time. This is after a long time. I think they have come back to power for the second time. That's usually it happens like this. The Congress comes to power once, and the left once. But this is for the first time they have come to power for the second time. So yeah, that I see as one of the reasons.
Okay, well, that's interesting. But maybe Youvrag, you could come back then on the question of the general strike, the farmers' movement, the trade unions, and some other broader issues of these important class battles that have taken place.
Yeah. So I mean, what we are witnessing in India is a very period of an, in a way, intense class struggle. And I mean, it has been triggered by the COVID, but no way it can only be it cannot be blamed completely on the virus. Even much before COVID, India's economy had been in the downward spiral because of the high-handed, handling of Modi government, of demonetization, the tax changes. Indian economy was already reeling under pressure, and whatever the pretense of growth it had been managing, all that has been, exposed by the COVID crisis. Uh, I would not go into the details and the figures of GDP, but then, Comrade Tony, what is very clear, becoming clear, is that despite of this thing, the kind of the way the government has decided to recklessly pursue neoliberalism is something which has really shocked the masses. If you look at globally, then we have seen that there has been at least some partial reversal of neoliberal policies, and many countries, including some of the leading capitalist countries, have at least for some time, have gone backward and have adopted some kind of Keynesian policies. But then kind of thought that this is the opportunity when, because of COVID, there is no chance of massive protest. He thought this is the opportunity that he should really carry forward the agenda of his masters, which is really nothing but the capitalist class. So he really thought that he would exploit the opportunity, and this government recklessly pursued neoliberal agenda in past 1 year. The way it has decided for the large scale privatization, then it has refused to even give a any genuine concession or any genuine welfare measures. Then the way it tried to attack workers and peasants, its attack on the workers and peasants is really a very savage attack. We know that the labor laws are quite weak in India. Modi government has decided to repeal that, and it introduced the new farm bills, which were to kind of give the control of the farming sector to the global corporate capital. That this was really a savage attack. But then India's working class and peasants have not taken that lying down. In fact, they have put really a very strong and rebellious response to it. Last year, we saw trade unions, giving a call to a nationwide strike, and that was, generally strikes in India tend to be a bit tokenist, but it had gone beyond that. And the, even the struggle by the peasant struggle has been quite heroic and quite massive. Because of the time limitations, I would not go into the scale of it. But then, if we look at the overall situation, I think the struggle in India has really reached to quite a next stage with the organized working class as well as the farmers massively putting forward a struggle to oppose this neoliberal offensive.
Okay, well, thanks, Youvrag, for illuminating some points on that. Now, very briefly, because we are beginning to run towards the end of our time frame, maybe Rashmi could briefly give a summation. I mean, we've had the struggles of the working class taking place, reflected in the general strike, the peasants' and farmers' movement which has taken place. What program is really necessary at this stage to advance the interests of the working class and the poor in India to begin to bring forward an alternative? And what is needed, in terms of a party for the masses at this stage? So maybe Rashmi would like to sum up on some of those points.
It wouldn't be an exaggeration if I say the new socialist alternative was the very first party to come up with this program of linking the peasant struggle with that of the working class struggle, because of the labor amendments and the amendments in the farm bill was like Comrade Youvrag said, it faced a huge backlash. The New Socialist Alternative, the comrades from New Socialist Alternative were able to actively take part in the bank workers struggle. We were able to go on ground, though because of the COVID situation, we were not able to extend the protest was not an extended protest, but the bank workers platform of NSA was, very active during these struggles because of the huge privatization activities that was uh, because that the Modi regime came up with. The bank workers were, like really against it, and they put forward many programs, and new NSA's bank workers platform was very active uh, in those struggles, and yeah, like we were the very first to have come up with a program of linking these struggles together. Comrade Yuvraj, do you want to mention any points to that?
Yeah. So, Comrade Tony, I mean, as I mentioned, this is really the period of intense class struggle, and there is very clear, change in the class consciousness, especially with the farm bills and other things. Now, it has become the common thing, even among masses, to identify Modi government as the agent of Ambani, Adani, two of the most crooked capitalists in India. So it has become a really kind of came to the level of common sense that people realize that this government is really the agent of capitalist class. So there is a massive class discontent. But as we know, the objective factor in itself would not really lead to the overthrow of capitalism. We really need the subjective factor, or which is the kind of revolutionary party, to kind of give the program to mobilize all these working classes and kind of various working masses to bring them together and to make it a united struggle against the and that is where we do not see the existing communist parties playing the role, and I think that is what is really needed. Let me take an example, because our criticism is not just a general criticism. So let me give an example of the peasant struggle. It was quite an heroic struggle, but it was really very important to connect that struggle with the demands of the various sections, or at least with the even like we'll come to the working class. But even if we look at the peasantry in India, is it a homogeneous mass of working masses? No, it's not. Every state has a different kind of agricultural situation. The plight of its peasants is kind of its demands. While they are broadly similar, they are very there are some specific differences. There was a need to use the peasant struggle as a rallying point and connect that with the specific demands, specific programs, specific to that particular class, specific to that particular geography, and mobilize these masses to form it a united struggle. Same goes even for the working class struggles. Even among the working class, there was a good amount of struggle by the trade unions, but did they link it with the demands of the various sections of working class? They could not. Let me again cite an example of the bank workers, struggle. I mean, bank workers are one of the among the leading working class, and they have really been doing quite good and continuously been opposing Modi government's neoliberal policies. But working class is under unorganized sector, and it has been deprived of even the basics of banking facilities. Was it possible to link the struggle against bank privatization to their demands, to making the credit available to these sections of the small traders, unorganized workers, or the farmers? It was possible, but because of the the limitations of both program as well as organizational demand, organizational weakness, wherein They did not try to mobilize these working kind of various sections of working class. Because of that, this we see that there have not been kind of the this struggle against the labor laws and peasant laws that could not really be translated into the massive class struggle. So that's really the weakness. And in terms of our program, I know we are running out of the time, but I'll just quickly mention some of the demands we have done. One of our important demand has been the demand to ban the corporate capital from Indian agriculture, not just agricultural production, but even the processing industry or distribution. We demand, like, food processing industry is one of the important industry, and it could really generate millions of jobs. So we demanded that there should be complete ban on for corporate capital in food processing industry, and food processing industry should be it should be run under the cooperatives of workers and peasants. Their cooperatives under their democratic control. The whole food processing industry should be run, creating millions of jobs. So we kind of demanded the programs like this. We're also among the first one to demand the nationalization of healthcare industry, pharmaceutical and large corporate hospitals. So yeah, just to mention the quick demands considering the limitations of time.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Youvrag. So, as you say, I mean, it's been a fantastic discussion about this horrific position. And maybe just in a few seconds, maybe Rashmi could maybe draw a few remarks to a conclusion about what do you see as the future for socialism in India?
Can Comrade Yuvraj come in first? Maybe
Okay.
I'll talk.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that we are at a very historical juncture wherein the capitalism is being hugely discredited. Modi coming to the power was a very important historical point wherein Congress, the established and the mainstream bourgeois party, was replaced with the much more aggressive and the much more authoritarian regime, and that was the best chance of Indian capitalism had to carry forward its agenda. But then, even from capitalist point of view, to an extent, a good section of capitalists is also now hugely disappointed with Modi, and in a way, the best chance of the Indian capitalist class to push forward its agenda is in a way, it has failed. So we see that now the stage is opening up wherein the ideas of socialism could really be massively be propagated at mass level. So we see that particular stage has really developed where the ideas could be propagated in a big way. Though obviously ideas without really a demand, without that kind of program, would not really go forward. But then we see that particular stage has come, and we see that with the right intervention, this is really very prospective era is opening up.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Youvrag and Rashmi, for that very illuminating discussion of the way forward in this horrific situation. I would just like to conclude today's broadcast.
So, like Trotsky said, the capitalism has already rotten. Like India is a very big example for this statement. That's because even during the COVID situation, like Comrade Yuvraj mentioned, we faced many pay cuts, many jobs, many people lost their jobs. So many corporates came up with layoff activities, and the labor codes were amended. So that provoked the consciousness of the mass working class. but at the same time, they had the need to cling on to the jobs that they had. They were not able to like many were the breadwinners of the home, so they wanted to cling on to whatever they had. This is a very complex situation, but I think this has to some extent, like Comrade Youvrag mentioned, has opened up a broader thinking, and I think this is the right juncture, and we are at a very crucial situation. Like we need to put our programs forward so that it reaches the masses, and it is also the right time to make our ideas visible and heard. Thank you. Thanks, comrade.
Comrade Tony, you there?
No, able to hear.
Okay. Looks like Comrade Tony, who's hosting the meeting, is currently not there. Either got disconnected or not audible.
Hello?
Comrade Tony, perhaps.